Hey, what's going on to all my Marvel MCU fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with a brand new early Marvel Cinematic Universe movie review, and we're meeting a brand new Marvel legend in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I got the opportunity to check out early in theaters, and I'm really excited to let you all know, is this new legend someone you all should be excited for? Do we get some kick-ass martial arts in the MCU? And more importantly, is this movie worth checking out only in theaters when it becomes available on September 3rd? We're going to break it all down here in this spoiler-free review, but before we do so, make sure you're checking me out on all my other social media accounts. If you all are new to the channel, well, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. If you all enjoyed this spoiler-free review of Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings, well, make sure to like and share the video. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate the support. And in the comments, let's talk excitement level. Let's talk anticipation level. But more importantly, once you've gotten the opportunity to see this movie, what'd you think about it? Let's talk about Shang-Chi and all the characters we get introduced to. What'd you think of their introduction, the origin stories? Are you excited to see these characters moving forward in the MCU? What'd you think of the story, the performances, the direction, the cinematography, the action? Were you impressed by the action that we get in this film? But let's talk about the other side of it, right? Were you disappointed? Were you let down? Was it a lackluster story? Are you not excited for this phase 4 and introduction of Shang-Chi and everyone that comes with it? And also, let's talk rankings. We got the, 25th film in the MCU. You don't have to share your entire list unless you want to, but let me know once you've seen Shang-Chi, where does it rank for you on your personal MCU film so far? And let's talk about it in the comment section. So going into Shang-Chi, I was beyond excited for it. I love meeting new characters that I'm not too familiar with in the Marvel comics. I know nothing, next to nothing besides I know that he's the master of martial arts, one of the best fighters in the Marvel comics. So I was excited to learn about this character. I was excited to meet Simu Liu. I know a lot of people love him from Kim's Convenience, so I love discovering new actors. I'm a big fan of this director, Destin Daniel Cretton. I think he's such a great director, so I was excited to see him in the MCU. Excited to meet a lot of the lore and the mythology, but more importantly, I grew up in martial arts. I took some karate when I was younger, but more importantly, I watched a lot of martial arts films. So I want to see if Marvel can give us some true martial arts in the MCU. So we're going to talk about all that, starting off with my positives. I want to talk a little bit about the production. That was something that really stood out to me because I thought that the set designs, which we'll talk about the action set pieces in a second, but I thought the set designs were gorgeous, well put together. It had a look, it had a feel, it had personality to the set designs, which kind of speaks into the production in regards to the budget. Marvel did not cut any corners. This is a really well put together film. Set design was great, costume was on point, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time speaking about this later, but the culture in this film, the personality, the legacy, what a name means to someone, all that stuff was really kind of potent and really like in the forefront when it came to this film. So production was fantastic, but I want to talk about the man behind the camera, and that is Destin Daniel Cretton, who I have been following since Short Term 12, most recently in Just Mercy. He's such a great character director, and he brings out the vulnerability, he brings out the highs and lows in character. So I was just so excited to see this independent director, which Marvel has been doing lately, right? Russo brothers, John Watts, you name it, they have been picking these, Chloe Zhao with the Eternals, they pick these directors that know characters, right? And then they give them this $200+ million budget to have fun with. So I thought that Dustin not only delivered in the character department, learning who these characters are, exploring things like what family means, what legacy means, what dealing with what identity looks like, right? We have Shang-Chi, who has grown up to be an assassin by his father, who we'll definitely talk about here in a minute. But I love how he's just kind of so complex and just doesn't know where to go, doesn't know where to turn, doesn't know who he is as a person, as well as there's various amount of characters that are just torn between, should I go this way? Should I not do this? Should I do this? There's just so much complexity and so much layers to these characters that, again, that's why I was so excited to see Dustin bring this to the forefront, is who are these characters that I'm not too familiar with, and I thought he did a great job in that, as well as tackling all the themes that we got in this film. So Dustin did not disappoint when it came to the direction of this film, but I want to talk about the performances, starting off with the man himself, the legend, Shang-Chi, played by Simu Liu, who, again, I am not too familiar with him, but I have heard great things about Kim's Convenience. I'm going to have to watch that one day, but he's an actor, he's a writer, but more importantly, he's a stunt man, which got me really excited to see him. He didn't do all his stunts, but listen, he did a majority of them, and that's what I love about this particular character and what I love about Simu Liu in this film. He sold me on the action. I'm going to have a whole designated spot and topic on the action in this film, but I thought that he he is that Marvel cinematic character that we've come to love, right? Whether it be introducing us to a Chris Hemsworth 10 years ago, reintroducing us to Chris Evans, opening up the door to people that wasn't familiar with Robert Downey Jr. Marvel is great at giving you these unknown actors and putting them in the forefront and making you fall in love with these characters. And I thought that Simu Liu fits so perfectly in MCU. I really enjoyed what he brought to the character and the layers he brought to the character. Again, his identity crisis, that he's been grown up to be an assassin, but he wants to put that lifestyle behind him, right? But it's not until his dad comes back into his life that he has to kind of face his demons. So I love the way that Simu Liu kind of portrayed that, but I thought that he sold me on the action, which again, I have a whole spot talking about the action in this film a little bit later. But Simu Liu, very excited for Shang-Chi moving forward in the MCU. But let's talk a little bit about the supporting characters. I thought that Awkwafina, she was fine in this film. She didn't blow me away. She didn't disappoint me, but she brought the comedic relief. She has her own little character arc in this film, again, addressing identity and what family means to her and figuring out who she is as a person. I enjoyed that aspect. But again, she wasn't like a standout character for me, but I enjoyed Awkwafina as Simu Liu's Shang-Chi's best friend in this film, and I'm really excited to see what they do with her moving forward. But the standout, the MVP, the absolute scene stealer in this film for me personally, and this is a gentleman that I've heard nothing but fantastic things about. This is my second time seeing a film of his, and I'm talking about Tony Leung, who plays Wenwu, who is also known as the Mandarin, but he goes by many names in this movie, but he is so incredible. He's such an accomplished actor in the Asian market. He's considered like the Daniel Day-Lewis. He's like an actor's actor. He's a fantastic actor from what I've heard. And again, I've seen Hard Boiled of his, and this was many, many years ago, but this is kind of really like my first time really being introduced to him as an actor. And oh my goodness, he is just, and this is no offense to the actors in this film, but he was just on another level. Like when it comes to Wenwu, he is such a complex, such a layered character. So he's easily one of the best villains in the MCU. He's up there with the Thanoses. He's up there with the Killmongers. I'm a big fan of Vulture. He's up there for me because this character, again, what I love about good villains is they believe they're the heroes in their own story. And when we learn about Wenwu, and also too, this is an amalgamation. This is a brand new character. This isn't a character from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're giving you the Mandarin kind of story mixed in with the Shang-Chi's father, which was a controversy within itself. So they're giving you kind of this new element of this character. And I thought I kind of understood where he come from. There is some elements that were kind of left in the dark for me that I'll talk a little bit about later, but just seeing who he is, knowing this legacy that he has to live up to, knowing the 10 rings and the legend that comes with this character, and just seeing his struggle throughout the film, him having his kids, how he fell in love, how he fell out of love, how he had to go back to the 10 rings was just a fascinating element, and he was the best character, the most complex, most layered, most developed character in this film for me, and I thought he was incredible. He was the best character in the film for me. But speaking of the best, I've been mentioning it this whole time that I got to talk about the action. Now, there's been a lot of rambling out there that this is the best action since the Raid films. This is, hands down the best fights that we've ever gotten in MCU, and I can say that most of that's true. I don't think it's anywhere near the Raid films because, again, that film is on another level. Those are Raid 1 and 2 are like some of the best action movies I've ever seen, but neither here nor there. To give the film its praise, to give the film its flowers, this is easily, and unfortunately, it doesn't really mean that much because there's not a lot of martial arts in the MCU, but this is easily the best fights that we've ever gotten in the MCU. This is true hand-to-hand combat. This is true the way they put the fights together. It's not all cut quicks. It's not shaky cams like a couple films that we got in earlier this year, whether it be Snake Eyes or Mortal Kombat. Those films were fine, but they didn't really live up to my expectations as far as martial arts films. This movie is really giving you the martial arts that I was really hoping to see. There was more martial arts I wanted towards a certain part of the film, but nonetheless, when we see the martial arts, it feels true. It feels authentic. It feels like a true, choreographies in the fights. I feel like they took their time with setting up the fights. It seemed like they actually want to give you the fights and actually put it in the forefront. And it has its own personality, it has its own style, it has its own beats to the story, because we're seeing the martial arts in this film. And we're seeing these characters learning different styles of martial arts, right? It's letting go of the anger and the resentment and the hate and being more free-flowing and knowing yourself and the light and the dark. So I love how martial arts is not only great and badass in this movie, but it actually plays an element into the actual storytelling. So the martial arts is pretty fantastic in this movie. But also I want to touch a little bit on the Marvel tie-ins. Now, there are some tie-ins that work. There are some tie-ins that don't work. Again, I'm going to talk about that more in a spoiler review, but I love when Marvel kind of puts itself into these films because it connects things, right? This isn't a spoiler, but this takes place after the blip, so exploring the world after the blip is somewhat handled in this film. We get some characters that we've seen in the past before in the MCU that makes an appearance. I'll just kind of leave it at that. So I thought that the Marvelness was, something I enjoyed. There are some moments I didn't enjoy that we'll talk about here in a second, but the comedy in the Marvel, worked for me in the most part. So those Marvel themes that we've come to expect in the last 13 years kind of makes itself in this film. But last but not least, I wanted to save one of my positives towards the end, and then last but not least, the culture. Now, for me personally, 3 years ago, seeing Black Panther on the big screen, how the cultural impact, seeing myself in Black Panther, T'Challa, and the majority of the cast being black was something I'll never forget. And I feel like that same type of sentiment can be said for the Asian community and seeing themselves on the screen. And just the stuff that this film tackles. Number one, I appreciated that there's a good percentage, there's probably like 15, 20, 30% in this big budget type of film that has their native language being implemented in the film. I really enjoyed that aspect. I love the conversations about honoring the dead, legacy, themes of confronting your past demons, as well as creating your own path and the fighting style and all this stuff. I really felt that the culture was so highlighted and so handled with so much authenticity. Again, Destin, as a director, you can see he wanted that to be such a huge part of this film. The passion is in this film, which I really appreciated. So those are really kind of the main things that stuck out to me as far as this film goes. But I do want to talk about some of my criticisms. Number one, I thought that the setup of this film was fantastic. Meeting Wenwu and learning a little about the Ten Rings and knowing what Sean has been doing before he identifies himself as Shang-Chi, and just that whole setup was really intriguing. But then we get into the second half of the film, and this is where the film kind of slows down its momentum. And this is not a spoiler, it's public knowledge. This gentleman was on the red carpet. He's on the IMDb page as far as a casting. I'm talking about Ben Kingsley as Trevor. I'm not a fan of that character. The only thing I like about Trevor is when he portrayed the Mandarin in Iron Man 3 is, when he was pretending to be the Mandarin. I did kind of buy into it. You'll never see me coming. Like, that stuff was interesting, but then obviously it was a big funny joke. And that's my issue with this film. When it comes to how much Trevor's in this film and when he's implementing this film, that's when I really kind of lost interest in the story. And I thought that the story kind of lost interest in what it was trying to say and kind of went to this more the goofy, silly MCU side of stuff that really doesn't always work for me. And that kind of is really unfortunate, because I thought that it was, yes, you have to see how Trevor plays in it, because he was playing the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. And there's, the Ten Rings are a big part of the MCU. Obviously, we met the Ten Rings in Iron Man 1. We saw them in Ant-Man. They've been in the background. So I was excited to see, obviously, the resolution to him pretending to be this character. But listen, for some people, they're going to love it. They're going to think it's hilarious. But I did not like anything that Trevor had to bring to the story. I'll just kind of leave it at that, and I'll leave that for more of a spoiler discussion. But something else that kind of stands out to me, it's more so in the second and third act of this film. I felt like the third act felt a bit rushed, because there's this whole nother layer and elements of the story that they introduced in the third act that just felt like it could have been more fleshed out. It was almost like an introduction to Wakanda, and I'll just kind of leave it at that I wish we could have explored more of the world that they introduced in this movie. It's a CGI fest at the third act, which it was visually stunning to see, but the thing that I want to get more in the third act is we get all this great action, hand-to-hand martial arts in the first and second act of this film, but then we get that in the third act, but then we get like all the CGI and the rings clashing, and there's other elements and creatures, I'll just say, that appear in this film that I just felt like, oh man, the CGI is just really overwhelming the hand-to-hand combat that I wish we could have gotten in the third act. And also when it comes to that third act, again, there's a lot of stuff this film tries to introduce that I just felt like we could have almost had the whole movie just be in this element that we're introduced to. So I thought the third act was a little bit clunky for my personal taste. This might be controversial. Simu Liu is great in selling the action. Simu Liu is great in playing off Awkwafina in the comedy beats and having that charm and charisma. But to me, I think there's a little bit of the writing, but also the performance and a little bit of the direction. I won't lie. But Simu Liu, when he's given the more dramatic beats, I didn't buy it. He didn't sell me on the dramatic beats. I didn't feel the father and son dynamic in regards to the hate, the love, the complexity, and some of those emotional beats didn't really work for me. There's a particular story involving Shang-Chi and his sister that really doesn't go anywhere. It's introduced in regards to regret and kind of hate between these two siblings, and I felt like the film really didn't resolve that. There's obviously more to explore, but I wish the film didn't forget that storyline. I feel like they kind of forgot about it. But again, my biggest thing was I felt like Shang-Chi the younger version of him sold me on the complexity that was going on with the character, but I felt like the older version didn't really give me all the emotional beats I was looking for. So that's something that stands in mind. I don't want to spoil this, but I'll just say there's a phase 1 common thing that they did in phase 1 that they do in this film that I wasn't a fan of, and I'll talk about in my spoiler review. The Ten Rings, they dabble in the explanation, but they don't really explore the origins of the Ten Rings, the legends of the Ten Rings. We really don't get that much legendary explanation. It felt a little bit underwhelming as far as the actual organization didn't feel as threatening as I would like to have seen in this film, as well as there's 2 particular characters that look cool, but I feel that they were kind of whack and kind of weak, and I'm talking about Razor Fist as well as the Death Dealer. Those characters look very awesome, but they're very underutilized and kind of really weak in my opinion. I gotta say it, I hate to say it because I'm a big fan of Benedict Wong, but I think him as Wong just kind of feels like fan service. He really doesn't add much to the story, and I'll talk about that in my spoiler review, but I didn't feel like Wong's inclusion was just literally just like, hey, let's just throw in, we have this great Asian cast, and I love that they bring in all the Asian cast members, but I just feel like they threw Wong in just to kind of have that kind of check off a box in my opinion. And then last but not least, I mentioned third act, but I really wish the film would have had more of the martial arts involved in the third act of the film and not so heavily reliant on the CGI. So those are my main criticisms. Before I give you all my overall thoughts, if you haven't already, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Overall, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a film that definitely kind of really gets me excited to learn more about this character. The action's on point, the cinematography's on point, meeting these new characters is a lot of fun. Destin Daniel Cretton, I really hope that he makes another appearance as a director, whether it be sequels, whether it be other projects in the MCU, because I think he's such a fantastic director. I do have my issues with the Trevor character, the second half taking a little bit of a dip, the third act relying too much on the CGI, but at the end of the day, this is a phase 4 film that really gets me excited for the rest of phase 4 with this character, with the post-credit scenes and everything that it had to offer. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings a solid 3.8 out of 5. It's not a great film. It has great moments in the film, but it doesn't really hit those great top 10 MCU moments for me in regards to movies. So I'm going to say right now, after our one-time viewing, I want to put Shang-Chi in probably my 12th spot in my rankings of the MCU films. Again, it might move up on a revisit, but right now I'm sitting at number 12. And like I said, I'm giving it a 3.8 out of 5, and I definitely recommend you all give it a watch. I'm going to see it again. I'm going to see it when it comes out opening weekend and see if those things I didn't like maybe get a little bit of an improvement. But 3.8 out of 5, definitely recommend you all check it out. And when you do, let me know your thoughts, your pros, your cons, your thoughts on the action, the story, the narrative, the characters, post-credit scenes without diving into the spoilers. And so we're going to have a designated spoiler breakdown review, but let me know your thoughts on the future of the MCU and also your criticism. And again, where does this movie rank for you on your MCU rankings? If you all stuck around to this point of the video, thank you so much for watching the video. Again, just a friendly reminder to like, share, comment below, and of course, hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss any other content. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.